If you have an entry-level DSLR like this one right here, which is a Nikon D3400, chances are you have various scene modes and effects on your larger dial. We're going to spend a little bit of time and discuss those in more detail. If you've seen any of my videos in the past, you'll know that I am not a big proponent of the full auto mode. Nonetheless, I have received a handful of questions regarding the various scenes that are included on this camera right here, which is the Nikon D3400. Other entry-level cameras include scene modes as well. Camera manufacturers know that on entry-level DSLRs, more often than not, people who are using them are more accustomed to full auto mode. Now, I created a video on the Fearsome 4, also known as PSAM, and those are the modes that are labeled as P, S, A, and M. Now, it is quite a jump to go from the full auto to those modes, and again, I believe the manufacturers are aware of this. So when you look at the different scene modes, the scene mode is really like full auto, except it gives the photographer a way to nudge the camera in a certain direction. That's really all it is, and because I've received a lot of questions on it, I feel it's probably worthy of spending a little bit of time talking about these modes. Now, I'm going to jump into each one, and I'm going to discuss them, and I'm going to let you know kind of when to use it, why you might want to use it, and then I'm going to also jump into the effects mode. This camera right here does have an effects mode, so I'm going to talk about that, and along the way, when applicable, I'm going to demo each one of the scenes and the effects and what it can do for you. Then I'm going to finish up with a few final thoughts. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump right in. We're going to start with the full auto mode. So it's green. I don't know why it's green. I guess they've always been green. You know, you could use yellow maybe or blue, but just about any entry-level camera I've seen with the full auto mode, it's green. So maybe green for go. I don't know. But nonetheless, full auto is doing just that. You have no control over the camera. When it's in full auto, the camera has complete control. All you're doing at this point is you're just focusing in on your subject and shooting, and you're pushing the button. That's it. The camera will handle the rest. For our composition, I have a bouquet of suckers in front of us. Now these are dum-dums, and if you haven't had them, they're great. But the reason I have them is because the wrappers are colorful. And it's really going to help us down the road here. Now, behind our bouquet of suckers, I have some artwork. It's about 2 to 3 feet behind that flower pot, and it's going to give us some depth of focus as we get going. Now, I'm in full auto mode. You can see the icon in the upper left-hand corner, and take note of our shutter speed, which is at 1/125th of a second. F-stop is 5.6, and our ISO is at 4,000. Now, I do have some extra lights pointing at our subjects here, and I've got them tilted away just a bit, and you'll notice as I go to press the shutter that the camera will detect and meter the situation, and it popped the flash. Now, take a note of our shutter speed. It's at 1/60th of a second, f-stop 5.6, and our ISO is dropped to 2,000, which is better than the 4,000, but I'm going to go ahead and take this shot, and you'll notice that it looks okay. The flash is just straight on, and that's what full auto does for you. There's really nothing special going on here. Next up is the flash prevention mode. Now, I don't know if this is really so much a scene or a mode as it is a feature of the camera. Now, what's nice about this is if you have kids or you've ever been at an event of some sort, kind of think about like a school event or a play or a musical, something like that, and you'll see the parents that are trying to take pictures of their kids or performers on stage, and inevitably they'll pull their camera out and they'll go to get that shot. They're in full auto with whatever they're using, and the flash pops. Now, unless they're up really close, they're really not going to get that good of a photo with the flash anyway, and it's really more of a distraction. So that's what this mode is all about. We are in the do not flash mode as indicated by the icon in the upper left. If you want, take note of our shutter speed at 1/125th of a second, and our aperture is at 5.6 and the ISO is at 4,000. Now this is very similar to what we saw in the full auto mode before the flash popped. The difference here is the flash will not pop, and this camera is going to take the image with the settings you see. Let's go ahead and take this image now. As you can see, this image looks better in my opinion. It's softer, there's better light all around, but keep in mind that our ISO is at 4000, so we're going to end up seeing some extra noise in this image, especially when we zoom in and do any kind of large prints. Next up is the portrait mode. So on the portrait mode, what this is really doing is the camera is going to try to accentuate skin tones. In addition, it's going to try to manipulate the aperture in a way that's going to yield a softer background. So it's going to take your aperture and it's going to try and open it up. Now, I don't know if it's going to go wide. Again, the camera has full control over it. You're just kind of nudging the camera in this direction, but that is the concept behind portrait. We're in portrait mode, as you can see by the icon in the upper left-hand corner. And also take note of our shutter speed at 1/30th of a second, f-stop is 5.6, and the ISO is at 1000. The other thing to note in this mode is that next to the icon for portrait, you'll see the flash indicator, and next to it you'll see the word auto. That tells us that the camera can automatically fire the flash if it feels it needs to. So I'm going to go ahead and press the shutter. As you can hear, the camera popped the flash. I'm going to go ahead and take the photo. Now, as you look at this photo, there's really nothing special going on here. One thing to note is that in this particular mode, it will try to adjust that f-stop, but in this case, it's as wide as it can get with the lighting conditions that we have. Next up is landscape. So with landscape, it's kind of the opposite of portrait. In the fact of the aperture, instead of trying to get a blurred background, it's going to try to bring in more detail, so that number's going to go up. And it may try to pull a little more saturation on the colors, not in skin tones, but just other colors. So that's really kind of the point behind the landscape, is to get more detail, accentuate a little more color, and hopefully yield a good landscape shot. We're in landscape mode as indicated by the icon in the upper left-hand corner, and notice next to it that the ability for the camera to fire the flash is no more. You can see it has a line through it. So in this particular mode, the camera will not use the flash. Take a note of our shutter speed at 1/15th of a second and our f-stop of 8, ISO at 1000. Let's go ahead and take the photo. It's kind of tough to tell here, but with the f-stop of 8, we're going to have a little more focus in the background, and that's exactly what should happen when it comes to landscape scenes. Next up is the kid mode. So think about kids running around, and they don't really stay still that long, depending on the age, I guess. And what the camera is going to do here is it's going to try to increase the shutter speed, and if need be, it will also engage the flash. But the camera knows that you're trying to snap a shot of something moving around. So that's the concept behind the kid mode. We're in the kid playing mode as indicated by the icon again in the upper left-hand corner, and notice next to it that the flash is set to auto. Notice our shutter speed is at 1/60th of a second, f-stop is 5.6, and our ISO is at 1600. Let's go ahead and take this photo. Now, one thing to note here is that the flash did not fire. And at 1/60th of a second, we can hold that. And this is really meant for those kids, again, just kind of running around. Next up is the sport mode. Now, with the sport mode, the flash will definitely not fire. And think about things like sporting events, people running or hitting a ball or things of that nature. So that's really the concept. The camera is really going to focus on the shutter speed. At this point, it's going to try to jack it up, and it may also take the ISO and raise it up, so you can probably expect a little bit of noise with the image. We're in the sport mode, as you can see by the icon in the upper left-hand corner. And notice next to it that the flash indicator is set to off. So in the sport mode, this camera will not fire the flash. And take a note of our shutter speed at 1/100th of a second, and our f-stop is 5.6. But notice in order to raise our shutter speed, we had to raise the ISO. Now keeping in mind, this is all automated within the camera. Let's go ahead and take this shot. Now the picture looks fine. It's just something to note is with the higher ISO, if we did zoom in and print this, we would probably see a little more noise. Next up is the macro. Now keep in mind that when you go into macro mode, the lens that we have right here is not a macro lens. So this is really telling the camera that you're going to shoot something up close. So it's going to try to let you grab focus at a much closer range. And that's really the concept. We could probably do a whole nother video on macro photography. But this, again, is really, it's just kind of a full auto, nudging the camera in the direction, saying that you're going to take something up close. We're in macro mode, as you can see by the icon in the upper left-hand corner. Now, for this particular shot, I have brought the camera closer to the subject, in this case, this bouquet of lollipops here, and I've zoomed in because macro is intended to do a better job with a closer focal point. So in this case, I am zoomed in, and as you can note right here, we're at 1/60th of a second. F-stop is 5.6, ISO is 500, and you can also see up here that our flash indicator is set to auto, so the camera may choose to use the flash, but I have brought in some extra lighting, so let's go ahead and take this shot. As you can see, it appears that the colors have rendered correctly, and the focus seems fine. Just note that this will not be a true macro picture because we don't have a macro lens, but again, this particular mode does do a fairly decent job with just bringing in close focus. Next up is the night scene. Now, what's interesting about the night scene is that it's going to use the flash, and it's most likely going to decrease the shutter speed a little bit. And the reason for this is that they're trying to get the subject with light on it and grab a quick shot of it, and also get the ambient light around the subject. So that's really kind of what you're telling the camera that you're wanting to do with this particular mode. We are in the night scene mode as indicated by the icon in the upper left-hand corner. And take a note to the icon next to it, which is our flash indicator. It says auto slow. Now the reason for that is that in this particular scene, the camera is going to try to grab all the ambient light that's around, and it's going to put a flash on our subject to try and give extra light to it. Take a note of our shutter speed at 1/8 of a second. Aperture is 5.6 with an ISO of 1600. Now I'm going to go ahead and press the shutter down. As you can hear the camera pop the flash, let's go ahead and take the shot. And as you can see, it doesn't look like it's anything that special, but keeping in mind that if we were outside and we had a subject with a lot of, say we had a background, like a downtown type background with a lot of lights, chances are our subject will be illuminated, and if the shutter is open long enough, it's going to grab all the ambient light. Just note that you're going to need a tripod of some sort if it's below 1/60th of a second. So, with all of those covered, let's go ahead and jump into the effects. Our first effect is night vision, and in this particular mode, the camera will take basically a black and white, and as you can see in the upper left-hand corner, our icon is set to night vision, and next to it, you'll see our flash indicator is saying that the camera will not leverage a flash. Now you'll notice our shutter speed is 1/100th of a second with an f-stop of 10, ISO of 6400, so we can expect some noise and grain with this shot. I'm going to go ahead and take it. As you can see, it's a nice black and white image, and that's basically what this effect does. Our next effect is super vivid. Now as you look at this, just even on the back of live view, you can see how the colors are oversaturated, and that's what this effect's about. Let's go ahead and take the shot, and you'll notice before we do so that the shutter speed is 1/125th of a second, f-stop 5.6, and our ISO is at 2500. Now you'll notice up here in the upper left-hand corner that we do have our vivid icon indicator. Next to it is the flash indicator saying the camera could pop the flash if it felt like it needed to. In this case, it doesn't need it. Let's go ahead and take it. As you can see, these colors are extremely oversaturated. Gives it kind of a cool look, but I don't know that you'd want that for all your shots. Next up is pop. Now the idea behind pop is to really bring colors out, not necessarily oversaturate them, but to call into the higher nature of the color and really make those colors kind of stand out. Down here in the bottom left-hand corner, we're at 1/125th of a second, 5.6, again ISO at 2500. Let's go ahead and take this shot. Now this image looks a little better, in my opinion, than the Vivid, but again, the colors are still accentuated here, but just not as much as Vivid. Next up is our photo illustration. Now, I don't know, this is it's just kind of an effect at, I guess, what a photo illustration might look like. One thing to note about this scene is right here, you'll see that there's some options for it, and it'll say OK to set. I'm going to go ahead and press this right here. And our option is the outlines. So I can use my pad on the right, move it to the right, and you'll notice that the outlines of the lollipops, they become more accentuated. You can go the other way and they're decreased. I'm going to go ahead and leave that in the middle. Just select OK. And you'll note that the flash will not fire up here. You can see our shutter speed, aperture, and ISO down here at 2500. Let's go ahead and take this. And as you can see right there, the camera does a little post-processing work, but this is essentially what it looks like. So again, it's just the particular effect. Next up is our toy camera effect. And again, similar to the other effect that we just did, we have the ability to make a few modifications. I'm going to go ahead and press OK. And what this is doing is you'll see the vividness. So the vividness is saying, do you really want to pull those colors out? Do you want to bring a little more light to this image? And you move it to the right for one stop. You can move it back to the left for to kind of bring it down a stop. I'm going to go ahead and leave that in the middle for now. Then you have vignetting. So vignetting is what it's going to look like on the outside. It's going to bring darkness in or lightness in. So I'm going to move it to the right, and you'll kind of see on live view how it got a little darker. We move it back to the left, and it's a little lighter. I'm going to go ahead and leave that in the middle, and let's go ahead and take this shot. And this is what it looks like. It actually looks kind of like a nice image. There was no flash that fired, and it's kind of pleasing to the eyes in my opinion. Next up is going to be the miniature effect. And again, we have some options to set here. So I'm going to go ahead and select OK. And something to note about this is that what this is doing is it's bringing focus to either the column or the row. And I'm going to show you just what I'm talking about. Look down here on the bottom. So right here where my thumb is, you will see that if we go to the left or to the right on our pad, it's going to switch from row to column. You can see that. And it's noted by the yellow indicators here. So there's our column, there's our row. And you can see the band of focus here. I'm going to move it back to the column. Now we're in focus here. Move it back to row, and we're in focus here. Now I can move this pad up and down and expand that focus if I want to. Now there's only 3 stops. That's really, really narrow right there. That's in the middle, and that's super wide. I'm just going to leave it on the row. We're going to leave it in the middle. I'm going to select OK, and let's go ahead and take this photo. So you can see right here that it's processing, and we have a little blur on the bottom and the top, but it looks like it's focused in the middle, and it looks good to me. Next up is the selective color. Now this one's kind of interesting because this is going to allow us to choose a particular color and everything else will become black and white for the most part. So you can see that we have some options here. I'm going to go ahead and select OK. And as I do, you can see this little indicator right here. And this is meant for us to put that indicator on the color that we want to select. Now, if you notice at the top up here, we have 3 banks of colors. So we can choose 3 different colors if we want. The number next to those banks is how strong we want those colors. So I'm just going to choose one color. I'm going to leave our indicator on whatever lollipop it's on right now, which it kind of looks like it's purple maybe. So for me to select this color, all I'm going to do is hit the up arrow on this pad. And what it's going to do is go ahead and select the color it's on. And you'll notice everything turned to black and white on the outside. And you can just see some of the purple lollipops in there. Now, we're highlighted on our number, so it's basically saying, do we want this strong or light? Now, I'm going to use my pad over here, and I'm going to arrow up. And there's 4, 5, 6, 7. Now it'll max out at 7. And you can see not only is it pulling in some of the purple, but it looks like it's pulling in maybe a little bit of the pinks as well. So when it's really, really strong like that, it's being really aggressive. It's going to pull in other colors as well that are close to its own color. And likewise, I can go down. There's 2 and there's 1. So you're going to get just a little bit of color there. Let's have some fun with this. I'm going to go ahead and bring this up a little bit. Let's go 7 with it, because it looks like it's pulling in the purples and the pinks. So I think it's going to make for a good image. So I like that right there. I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK. And I'm going to go ahead and take this shot. Now, as you can see, I really like the look of this shot. It brings out just some of the colors in the sucker bouquet, and it makes for a nice looking image. Next up is silhouette. So silhouette may not work so well in my test environment here, but it's as you might think. The concept is to take the subject and try and silhouette it and accentuate the background. Now, I have lighting that's more on the front, so this probably won't work so well. Just a couple of indicators here is the icon in the upper left-hand corner, and then the note right here that basically says the flash will not fire. Now, we're at 1/15 of a second with an f-stop of 8, ISO of 400, so this is relatively low right here. And again, we're in this automatic mode, so there's not a lot we can do about the ISO here. But at 1/15 of a second, you're going to need a tripod for a shot like this. I'm going to go ahead and take this. And as you can see, it really didn't silhouette our subject here, but I didn't think it would just because we have some lighting on the front of our subject. Next up is high key. Now, high key is meant to kind of blow the image out to bring extra light into this image. As you can see by the live view right here, now there is no flash that will fire. And our shutter speed is set to 1/125th of a second, f-stop at 5.6 with an ISO of 6400. So again, with that kind of ISO, we're definitely going to get a little noise in here. And you can see it's bouncing around. I saw 5,000 just a second ago. Let's go ahead and take this shot. And you can see that this image is really, really bright. Now, if I were doing post-processing, I would probably lower the exposure on it. But this is an effect, and this may be exactly what you're looking for with whatever you're trying to take. Last but not least is the low key. Low key is similar to the high, except it's making it darker. It's bringing all the shadows out. That's pretty much what this is doing. So it's just the opposite of the high key. And you'll take a look right here. The flash will not fire. And again, we're at 1/125th of a second with an f-stop of 5.6. And our ISO is set to 1000. So our ISO is much lower here. And that's pretty much what the camera is doing. It just knocked our ISO down. I'm going to go ahead and take this shot. And as expected, this image is kind of nice and dark. And again, it's really just an effect. That's all this is. A few final thoughts regarding the scene modes and the effects mode. I've always viewed the scene modes as being fully auto, except it's a slight nudge in the right direction. Now, I just created a video not too long ago on the Fearsome 4, which is the P, S, A, and M modes. And I encourage you to stay that course. You can do it. You just got to practice and practice and practice with it. And eventually you'll get the hang of those modes, and then the creativity will really begin to flow. But until you get there, if you want to jump off the fully auto mode, you might consider one of these other scenes, just keeping in mind that it's a baby step in the right direction, and it at least nudges the camera in the direction that you want to go. Now, when it comes to the effects mode, my thought on this is that you can do a lot of that in post-processing. It's kind of gimmicky in the camera, kind of nice in some ways, but I think if you want to apply any of those effects, it's best to take your photo and then handle that in software on your machine after the fact. Now, if you just want to take the photo and get it out and share it without getting into any sort of post-processing, maybe you'll use the effects. Now, one thing to think about is when you do take a picture with the effects, you lose the original image. So for example, if there's a nice scene and you want to do vivid and really oversaturate those colors, you could do that. But if down the road you want to capture the original scene without all the oversaturation, you're not going to have that image unless you take two images. So that's just something to think about if you get into the effects mode and start using that a lot. Again, I encourage post-processing, which leads me into my next thought, and that might be my next how-to video, and I don't know if it's going to be the next one, but it's going to be one of the upcoming ones. I want to talk more about post-processing. I think it's important. When you're out, you start taking photos, what do you do with them when you're done? You know, how do you want to dress them up? How do you want to store them? So I might get into that next. Now, if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't done so, subscribe to the channel. It's called Real World. And more often than not, I post videos about photography and technology, but I also post them about things that happen in the real world, like automobile maintenance or home ownership. You just never know. So until the next video, take care of yourself and be safe.